Bible Forum. I'm Warren Sprouse. We're in the midst of this coronavirus thing. I want to talk to you a little bit about working mothers and the coronavirus. A lot was made in the beginning about working mothers who must now stay at home because of this coronavirus pandemic. And if you're one of those mothers staying home, you know what this is like. And some of them are truly having a rough time of it. The children are home, and they must be both cared for as well as educated as much as anybody can. Some mothers are also working from home with children underfoot. It's got to be exhausting on every level. One of the advantages may be that dad has to be home as well. But maybe dad works at an essential industry or something or other, and he has to go to work. We don't know. But the news outlets are starting to feature these working mothers. Think about all of this. Why are they mothers and working in the first place? Well, because the family needs money. Do they? Or do they simply want more money? Now, admittedly, some have a need. Most do not. Secondly, these mothers have been college educated in a large percentage and want very much to fulfill their dreams, their aspirations by working. And the world has convinced them that they can have it all. They can do both. But the coronavirus quarantine is starting to make them wonder about that. Thirdly, the culture almost demands that mothers go to work. It wasn't always like this. It began in the 1960s and 70s. It came with the development of birth control pills. The early birth control pills actually damaged the vascular system in women, varicose veins. But it was also the women's lib movement, insisting that women could have it all. I talked to women in those days, some of which wept at not being able to stay home with their children, but being forced by the sisterhood, by the culture, to go to work. Not so much today, but there are still some. And many businesses have come to the realization that they must make allowances for working mothers since children get sick, women get pregnant, things happen that don't happen with men. Now, some businesses just don't care. They insist women work just like men, and if they can't, find another job. But today with the coronavirus, children are home from school. Now what? Well, we hear, and we will continue to hear, how difficult, how unfair all this really is. However, adults reaching adulthood learn a number of lessons, one of which is that life brings challenges. Challenges we can't always avoid, challenges that limit us and even damage us in several different ways. We're a culture that believes we're entitled to have everything our parents had or have, or perhaps everything our peers have, or just everything we want. No generation in human history, with the exception of the super wealthy, but of average human beings, no generation in history ever thought that way before about 1965. You married, you either went to work or you started a family. Usually you did a little of each. You bought a house, if you could. If you couldn't, you put off one or more of those goals. If a baby came along, You did what you had to do. You did what you could. And we called this character. In difficult times, World War I, the Great Depression, World War II, people did what they had to do. With the Korean conflict and then Vietnam, things were a little different. We don't even call these wars. The boom that followed World War II convinced people they could have it all. That was in the 50s. The sexual revolution in the 1960s convinced people they could abandon moral standards and they could still have it all. When the children of the 1960s grew up, they just didn't know any better. The history they knew included sexual freedoms, recreational drugs, gender bending. But it also came with something called AIDS, acquired immune deficiency disease. A disease brought to us by a man, brought to this country by a man, it was said, who was having sex with animals in Africa. And suddenly all these things changed dramatically. Today, gender no longer matters. Marriage no longer means what it did. The term family no longer means what it once did. And most people actually believe that government and or society is supposed to accommodate our personal desires, all the while making wealth a possibility. That is until COVID-19 came along. And now everything has suddenly reverted to 1940. 1940, when mothers stayed home and raised their children, took care of their home, managed the household, took walks with the children around the neighborhood, speaking to their neighbors and even strangers as they passed by. I'm watching that take place today. Are you? I have a part-time job. I drove a shuttle van for Toyota, a local Toyota dealership. I take people home. I pick people up. I'm in the neighborhoods in the middle of the day, filled with walkers and riders and joggers. As I drive through those neighborhoods, more and more people are out, often with children. Reminds me of the 1950s and 1960s, where neighborhoods were alive. However, clearly working moms are having the hardest of times. They're being interviewed and are clearly stressed. They don't know how they're going to make it. They're strained both physically and emotionally, with no end in sight or an end farther out than they think they can go. And the question is God doing this? Has God brought this into our lives to remind us of just how far out we have wandered? Showing us the weakness in our chosen lifestyle? Reminding us of what's really important? The strictly secular among us would say no. Actually, they would say it louder than that. No. The rest of us wonder, with some of us convinced that nothing happens aside from God's will and purpose, including sickness and death. So, what is God teaching us? Clearly, we're being taught that we are not as secure as we thought, but also that we are not as close to Him as we should or need be. If we were, we'd take all this in stride, knowing it was from our Father who loves us with an everlasting love. Our Father who never gives more than we can bear, but with it all makes a way of escape that we might be able to bear it. 1 Corinthians 10:13. Or, for when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. 1 Thessalonians 5:3. Now, that last one is oriented toward the end of the age, but the principle is applicable today. We are a comfortable lot, we here in the US of A. We are secure and safe. That is, until we aren't. And when we are not, then our world comes apart very quickly. Our routines are disruptive. Our lives become much more difficult. And how we handle it all exposes our character. It exposes who we are, good or bad, and that we as a culture don't get the message is an indication of just how far afield we have come, how far out of sync, out of touch with God and with godly principles and purposes we have gone. We've had a lot of time recently at home. How much of that did we spend in prayer, in reading the Bible to our children, getting back to reality, as opposed to just worrying or just enjoying the time off and standing in line to get toilet paper? The toilet paper issue in America has been a real interesting story. That's for another time.